This is my Lear DCC aluminum contractor canopy I had built for my mid-size four-wheel drive pickup as a place to sleep when I'm out exploring in the backcountry around Oregon and the rest of the West. Because this truck has a 5-foot bed, sleeping is not the most straightforward. I originally had a setup where I was sleeping diagonally. That worked reasonably well and is a feasible solution if you're not too tall. I'm 5'9" for reference. I could just barely sleep at an angle in the back of this truck. In order to create a more comfortable sleeping arrangement and just basically a more livable, usable space, I added this. This is the extension that I made. It basically replaces one of the doors. This modification has dramatically transformed my experience sleeping in this canopy. Overall, the space has become much more usable, much more comfortable. I've got the ability to get up and move around in here. I've got storage over here. I've got a complete full-length 6-foot bed. I can sit up in bed. I've got storage underneath. Really happy with how this has turned out. I already have a video about installing this insulation in the canopy, and I'll put a link to that in the description below. In a future video, I will talk about what I've done on the interior. In this video, I'm only going to talk about the actual extension that I built. And I will say I am just an amateur DIY guy. I don't have any particular expertise, knowledge, or experience. I had this idea, I went out and figured out a way to put it together. What you'll see is not necessarily the best way to do this or the right way to do this. It's what I came up with that was within my skill set in which I felt like would work. And so far it has.
I sourced all of the aluminum for this project from Coyote Steel here in Eugene, Oregon. This is also where I find scrap steel for my welding projects. The guys who work here are super helpful and the pricing is very fair.
Cut up like that, it's hard to believe that is 36 feet of aluminum angle. The rest of the canopy's sort of skeleton is made out of various shapes and sizes of tubing, but I decided to use the angle because already it doesn't need to be quite as strong as all of this does. It only needs to basically bear its own weight. It's going to have some support from inside too, and it just will be much easier for me to join this up. I can get these lined up. I can put a rivet in to secure it. It gives me lots of places to run some brazing over the joints to sort of weld it together on top of that. I just think it's going to be easier for me to construct than it would have been using tubing.
I'm using a decent rivet gun that was a step up from the cheapest option.
So these rivets are going to help hold this together as I build it, but they're not, I mean, they've got quite a bit of play. They wouldn't be enough to keep the whole thing steady, but it's going to allow me to get this built, and then I'm going to go back and braze all of these joints once everything is together and lined up the way I want it to be. I think this actually may be good that there's a little bit of play in there. It's going to allow me to get everything adjusted, hopefully. Coming up on May 12th, 2022, is Jackery's annual Jackery Day. And that is when they often announce a new product. And that's the same again this year. We've got an amazing new product coming out, but I don't even know what it is. Normally I have an inside track to what Jackery is coming out with next. In this case, they're being very tight-lipped about it. I know that something that they're very excited about will be announced on Jackery Day, May 12th. But I don't know exactly what it is. I know they're excited about huge power, huge capacity, multiple output options, portability, and just simply the idea of sustainable power, that you can basically provide yourself with limitless power outdoors, just harnessing the power of the sun. So be sure to keep an eye out for Jackery's announcement on May 12th. It'll be 8 p.m. Pacific if you want to get down to the minute. So if you're not really familiar with brazing, it's almost more like soldering than welding. You heat up your workpiece to around 750 degrees, and then you use these rods which melt at that temperature. It doesn't melt basically the parent material or whatever is already there, so it just creates a bond between them. So it's not as solid as welding, but it's pretty remarkably solid. I watched a bunch of videos on brazing, and if you're interested in learning more about it, I would recommend just doing some searching on YouTube and finding some videos to watch, because the people who know what they're doing can tell you better than me. It's surprisingly strong, and it's quite easy. It's not like welding where you need a hood. I did try to do it with my propane torch, but I could not get enough heat out of this. And so I had to track down what's called MAP gas. All of the home improvement stores were out of it, but I actually found some canisters at AutoZone of all places. And I also could not find a torch anywhere. I went to every possible store, called around. No one had a torch that would work with the MAP gas. They are different from what goes on propane torch. But fortunately, my buddy Shai, who has the YouTube channel Out and Back Oregon, he had a torch and he's letting me use his while I work on this project. Thanks, Shai. Actually, I'll tell you what convinced me that the brazing should be strong enough for this project is the channel Project Farm, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, tested a bunch of different brands of these brazing rods. You can go watch that and see which brands make the most sense in terms of value and strength. But what was really impressive is he made joints using various brazing rods, and then he tested them for strength, and I was astonished by how well this stuff held. He even patched an engine cylinder and then fired the engine back up, and it worked, it held. So I would go watch that video if you want to see just what this stuff is capable of, and I'll put a link to that in the description below. So I use the rivets to sort of hold everything together, and I feel like the rivets will also provide some additional structural integrity. Once I started brazing some of those corners, the whole thing stiffened right up. A packet of the rods is about 20 bucks, and the gas canister was $18, I think. I brazed as many of the joints as I could with this actually mounted on the back of the truck so I could make sure everything was positioned and fitted properly. And so I went around and did all of the joints that I could with it mounted on the truck to stiffen it up. But I had to take it back off to do the joints that were right up against the canopy because this was just too hot. It would melt the paint, it would melt anything that's around it. Actually, I find I have to be careful because I burned away some of the aluminum in a few places.
The brazing's rod melt at around 750 degrees Fahrenheit. Aluminum melts at 1,220 degrees Fahrenheit. So you can get the workpiece hot enough to add brazing without damaging anything. But you have to be careful working with thin aluminum, as the MAP gas torch will easily heat it past the melting point.
So this still needs to have other horizontal pieces. I'm also going to put in some angled brackets and gussets, whatever, to firm it up. But just with this very basic part of the structure, now that I've brazed all of those joints, I am astonished by how much that stiffened it up. I mean, it's just, it feels completely solid.
Now that the overall framework is assembled, I'm riveting in some of the additional cross pieces I need. I will be brazing all these joints as well to make the entire structure as solid as possible.
Because I won't be able to mount the max fan just anywhere on the sheet metal, I'm building in some foundation for it so that there's some strong framework to mount it to. And here across the bottom, I'm actually using 1-inch tube. I think the angle probably would have been strong enough, but this is really super strong. That's gonna really help bear the weight of the fan, I think. All right, so there, it's really starting to come together. I think this framework is basically done. I need to take the measurements for the outside sheet metal panels so that I can get that ordered. So there are the pieces of aluminum sheet to skin the outside of that framework. My local metal supply place cut this for me. I brought them this diagram basically, which showed the pieces that I wanted. They got them cut for me. I was worried about the expense on this because I did a little bit of sort of pre-research online. I checked some like online places where you can order cut aluminum sheeting, and like one of these side panels was going to be like over $250. At my local metal place, all of this was $156 with them cutting it. It all fits perfectly, so I'm really happy with that.
I'm securing the outer sheet metal skin to the framework with rivets.
All right, so the sides are now completely on, along with the bottom. So I still have to do this top piece.
I had the top piece cut long with the intention to bend it down over the top front seam, but lacking a press brake, I was concerned about my ability to make a clean bend in precisely the right spot.
I think it doesn't look that bad with this little eave coming off of it, and I think that would shed rain just as well as folding this down. All right, so there's sort of a preview of the box in place. Now I still have to do the corners, and it needs to be painted, and the fan needs to be installed. So I really went back and forth on what to wrap the corners of this with. Part of me wanted to use more of the same angle aluminum, but I also found this galvanized flashing at the hardware store. What I like about this is that it's quite a bit more flexible than the aluminum. This isn't 100% perfect. I've got little imperfections. I've also got rivet points, and underneath there are other rivet points. I can really get this galvanized flashing to sort of conform to the imperfections along the corners of the box. The other thing is that it's really, really easy to machine. I've got a lot of little nooks and crannies that needs, little cuts to fit into here, to fit into there. I also like the fact that it's so very, very thin that it does not add any additional thickness, which would pose an issue in a few of the places. One additional advantage to the galvanized flashing is this stuff is dirt cheap. It was about $5 for a 10-foot length of this, and I got 20 feet of it, and that was enough to do all this box, and I've got about maybe 5 to 6 feet left over. Now I know the common wisdom is that you don't put steel and aluminum up against each other, but I think with the galvanized it's okay, because this isn't just mild steel, it's got a galvanized coating on it. There are a number of places in the canopy where there are galvanized steel parts up against the aluminum of the canopy. So I hope it's going to be okay. I also hope that I'm going to have this sealed up so well that there would be no water penetration to even, cause anything to start happening. So with the box all assembled and the aluminum sheet on, and all of those corner pieces are all cut and fitted and ready to go on, I think I'm ready to start sealing this up. I'm going to wait till tomorrow morning when I've got better light out here. Did a lot of research and reading online, ended up in, van life forums, RV forums, actually marine and boat forums, did a lot of looking at different products. And I would encourage doing your own research and drawing your own conclusions. I'm not saying that what I'm doing is necessarily the right way to do it. This is, after all of that reading, this is what made sense to me as being feasible and hopefully will work. So what I'll be doing first is applying this seal-tight corner seal, which is made by Dicor, and it's made specifically for sealing up the corners of RVs. It's supposed to provide a permanent weatherproof seal all by itself. So I will be covering all of the joints with this first. Obviously I'll have my corner moldings that I made last night, and these will be lined with butyl tape. Now butyl tape is this sort of gummy, squishy, almost Play-Doh-like substance apparently that comes in sort of tape form. Now, I wasn't familiar with it, but from what I've read, it's a very effective weather sealant. In fact, I realized that's what is used on the canopy. And for good measure, I'm also going to run some Sikaflex 221 in there. So everybody talks about this. This provides a very permanent adhesion, as I understand it, as well as being very, very waterproof. My understanding is you don't want to use this stuff on anything that may need ever to be taken apart. In some places, like at the exterior where the box meets the canopy, I'm going to use just pure silicone, and usually with some work peel silicone off pretty cleanly. So if I ever needed to remove the box, put the door back on, restore the canopy to its original state, I'm hoping that this will provide a good weather seal, but also end up being removable if I need it to be removed. And I got the most expensive 50-year guarantee silicone that they had at my hardware store. If this fails in 50 years and I'm still alive to see it, well, I'll just be glad that I'm still alive to see it.
The die-core tape is lined with peel-off cellophane along the adhesive side. I found it easy enough to work with, but it definitely required being slow and methodical.
So my process here is that first of all, I'm marking all of the spots where I don't want to drill new rivets through because there's already rivets. Then I'm applying the butyl tape to the molding. So once I've got that butyl tape in place, what I've been doing is using a straight edge to draw a line where I want my rivets to follow. So I want my rivets to go in, into where that butyl tape runs. And I want them to be, I want them to be in a straight line so they look tidy also. Then, based on where I can or can't put new rivets, I'm marking my rivet points.
Yeah. I just know that renting a car is
To keep the drill on track through this galvanized flashing, I found it easier to just give it make a little dent in it right where I want to drill. And I'm putting some of this Sikaflex at the ends. I don't think it's going to do anything down here because this space is sealed by that. And I'm going to run a bead of caulk along those edges also. But since those ends are not protected, I'm gooping some of this in there. Now I'm going to get this on here. Where I want it. I've got all of those corner moldings installed, riveted on with the butyl tape. And now I am going to run a bead of Sikaflex along all of the seams also. I'm using the Sikaflex to run a bead of caulk along these seams because this, unlike the silicone, this is paintable. So I'm going to put this on now to seal all of those little edges as much as possible, even though the butyl tape is in there. And then we'll put paint over the whole thing. So 2 pieces of advice that I saw a lot online. One was to use some soapy water on your finger when you're sort of smoothing out the bead of the Sikaflex. And the other is to mask the area around the seam and then apply the Sikaflex and sort of feather it out to the tape and peel the tape back off. And then you get a sort of a cleaner finish. So I experimented on the bottom panel that no one's going to be able to see. And it definitely seems to work better with the masking tape, and the soapy water is definitely helpful. I know everyone also says, get a better caulk gun. This gets the job done. I didn't want to spend a bunch more money. I've already spent way more money on this than I intended. This gets the caulk out of there, it's fine. I decided to just go ahead and deliberately carry the skin of it over the top of the rivets as well. I feel that may add just a little extra weather resistance there. All right, so in the light of day, I don't know if you can tell, the Sikaflex caulking really maintains some texture. Definitely going to see that through the paint, but at least these clean lines will hopefully help it look a little tidier.
I'm putting an initial coat of self-etching primer over all the bare metal.
For paint, I just used plain old Rust-Oleum. I used satin because I thought that the high gloss would be a little glossier than the canopy. Ultimately, maybe I should have gone with the gloss paint. I'm not sure, but it's fine. It's black. It's usually dirty, so I'm not too concerned with it.
I'm applying butyl tape to the canopy door frame where the extension box will be seated.
The extension box is bolted onto the canopy framework in multiple places all the way around. I can't show you the ones underneath the bed. And is also bolted to the bed platform, which is bolted to the bed of the truck. The box itself is very lightweight, and I have not had any issue at all with anything loosening up. I just have basically bolts and lock washers and nuts on there. This has been out for days on some pretty rough trails, and I've not had a single issue with it. And disregard my fan install here for now. This is not done. There'll still be insulation coming over here and a finished piece of this fan and permanent wiring. So that's just temporary. Disregard that. I'm happy to report that the weather sealing has worked flawlessly. You can kind of see a little bit of the butyl tape that has oozed out there. That's good. That's what you want to see. This has been sitting out in some pretty heavy rainstorms over the past couple of weeks, and I have not got a single drop in. The exhaust fan I installed is the Max Air Dome, and I will also do a separate video on the installation and what I think about this. My Trasharoo bag here is actually a Czech military surplus I got from a military surplus site. I actually have a video about that as well. I'll put a link in the description below.
Upcoming videos in this series will cover the interior build, water storage, and the exhaust fan installation and review. Thank you for watching.